The Porsche arrived on a Thursday morning, hauled in on a flatbed, with its nose pointed down like something ashamed of itself. Joel Hart watched it come off the ramp from the open bay of his garage, wiping his hands on a rag that hadn't been cleaned since Tuesday. It was a 911 Turbo S, Atlantic blue metallic, the kind of color that looks almost black in shadow and costs extra just to put on the order form. One rear wheel was missing entirely. The other three were wrapped in tires that probably cost more than his mortgage payment. The front splitter had a crack running through it that someone had tried to cover with duct tape, which told him everything he needed to know about how the car had been handled in the last 48 hours. The flatbed driver handed him a clipboard without making eye contact. Behind it, a second vehicle pulled into the lot, a white Mercedes SUV, current year, not a scratch on it. The door opened and a woman stepped out wearing the kind of clothes that don't have visible brand names because they don't need to. She was somewhere in her early 40s, hair pulled back, sunglasses that probably cost what Joel charged for a full engine rebuild. She looked at his garage the way people look at a gas station bathroom. Necessary, unpleasant, temporary. Her name was Serena Cole. Joel would learn later that she was the regional VP of something in commercial real estate, that she had an office on the 14th floor of a building downtown with her name on the door in brushed steel letters, and that she had already spent 6 days and somewhere north of $80,000 trying to get this car running again. He didn't know any of that yet. What he knew was that she was walking toward him like the ground owed her an apology for existing. "You're the mechanic?" she said. "I own the shop," Joel said. She looked past him at the garage. 2 lifts, a wall of tools organized by size, a 1994 F-150 up on one of the racks with its transmission hanging in a cradle. His daughter's drawings were taped to the inside of the office window. He'd meant to take them down when he repainted, but somehow never did. "Porsche sent their own technicians," she said, twice. "The second team was flown in from Atlanta. Before that, I had the car at Meridian Auto in the city for 4 days. She paused. "They couldn't find the issue. What's it doing?" "Nothing. That's the problem. It doesn't do anything." She pulled her sunglasses off and looked at him directly for the first time. "It cranks. It doesn't start. They've replaced the fuel pump, the battery, the main relay, and something called a DME module, which alone cost $11,000. The car still doesn't start." Joel crouched down beside the driver's side and looked in through the window. The interior was immaculate. A child's drawing of something that might have been a horse, or maybe a dog, was tucked into the visor on the passenger side. He noticed it the way he noticed everything, filed it without comment. "How long has it been sitting before this?" he asked. She hesitated. "About 4 months." "Where?" "My ex-husband's garage, unheated." Joel stood up. He looked at the car for a moment, then back at her. "I'll take a look," he said. She blinked like she'd expected something else. A quote maybe, a timeline, some kind of professional fanfare that matched the money she'd already spent. "That's it?" "That's it," he said. She didn't leave. That was the thing he noticed first about Serena Cole. She stayed. She sat in her Mercedes with the engine running and her laptop open, glancing up every 20 minutes or so through the windshield. Joel pretended not to notice. He'd had owners do that before, usually when the car meant something to them that had nothing to do with transportation. He started with the basics. Not because he thought the Porsche team had missed something obvious, but because, in his experience, the people who come in after other people have already worked on something tend to find problems that were created by the working, not by the original fault. $11,000 worth of parts installed on a car that still doesn't start usually means the $11,000 solved the wrong problem. He pulled the codes first. The DME had been cleared recently, he guessed, so there wasn't much there. He checked fuel pressure. Good. Spark. Present. He went through the ignition circuit by hand, which took time because he did it the way his first shop foreman had taught him 20 years ago. Before he was an engineer, and before he was a widower, and before he owned anything at all. Every connector, every ground, every inch of harness you could reach without pulling the interior. It was past noon when his daughter called. He answered on the second ring the way he always did, because Sophie was 7, and he had a rule with himself that he didn't let her calls go to voicemail. "Dad, hey, Bug, Mrs. Turano says we're doing a project on animals, and I want to do mine on axolotls. Is that okay?" "That's great. Axolotls are cool. Do we have books about axolotls? We can get some. I'll stop at the library tonight. Okay, a pause. The kind of pause that meant she was deciding something. Are you busy? A little, but not too busy. Okay, love you. Love you too, Bug. Be good. He put the phone in his chest pocket and went back to the wiring harness. It was another hour before he found it. It wasn't the DME. It wasn't the fuel pump or the relay or any of the components that the Porsche technicians had replaced. It was a ground strap, one of 4 that connected the engine block to the chassis, each about the size and weight of a man's belt. 3 of them were fine. The 4th had a corrosion point so small it would have been easy to overlook, a patch of green oxidation where the terminal met the lug, the kind of thing that develops slowly in cold storage and looks like nothing until you test it, and find that what should be a fraction of an ohm is reading nearly 4. Not enough resistance to stop everything all at once. Just enough to confuse the computer into thinking the engine was doing something it wasn't, which made the DME pull fuel delivery, which made the car crank without firing, which made 6 days of increasingly expensive diagnostics chase a ghost through $12,000 of brand new components. Joel cleaned the terminal. He torqued the connection back to spec. He replaced the strap while he was there, because it cost $12 and he had one on the shelf, and there was no point being right about a small thing if you were going to leave the small thing in place. He pressed the start button. The engine turned over once. Then the flat 6 woke up. It was not a subtle sound. A Porsche 911 Turbo S at idle in a closed garage is a sound that fills the room the way a large animal fills a small space. Not aggressive exactly, but unmistakably alive. Joel sat back on his stool and listened to it run for a moment. He checked the idle speed. He watched the temps climb. Everything was where it was supposed to be. He'd been in the garage for 3.5 hours. He heard the Mercedes door open outside. Serena Cole walked in from the afternoon light with her sunglasses in her hand and stopped 4 feet inside the bay door. The sound registered on her face before anything else did. The confusion first, because it was a sound she'd been waiting 6 days to hear. And then something else he couldn't name exactly. Something between relief and something sharper than relief. You started it, she said. It's running, he said. She walked around to the driver's side and looked in at the dash. All the warning lights were gone. The tach was sitting at 800 RPM, steady as a clock. She reached out and put her hand on the roof of the car, and for a second she was just a person standing next to something she'd been worried about, and the real estate VP and the 14th-floor office and the brushed steel nameplate had nothing to do with any of it. What was wrong with it? She asked. Joel told her. He explained the ground strap the way he'd have explained it to anyone. Plainly, without shortening it so much that it became mysterious or lengthening it so much that it became a lecture. A single corroded connection. 4 months of cold storage. The computer reading a false signal and shutting down fuel delivery in response. The whole system protecting itself from a problem that didn't exist. She was quiet for a moment. The Porsche team replaced the DME, she said. I know. That's $11,000. Yes, and this was a ground strap. The connection on the ground strap. The strap itself I replaced while I was in there, but that was $12. She looked at the car. She looked at him. Something moved across her expression that wasn't quite embarrassment but was related to it. The specific discomfort of realizing that the framework you'd been operating inside of was wrong. That the expensive answers you'd been buying hadn't been answers at all, because nobody had asked the right question first. Why didn't they find it? She asked. It was a fair question. Joel had thought about it while he was working, because it was the kind of question that had an answer. Cold storage changes things, he said. Corrosion builds differently than damage does. It doesn't show up on a scan the same way. The codes were pointing toward the DME because the DME was reading bad data, and once you replace a component and the codes don't change, the instinct is usually to look further into the system, not further back from it. He paused. Also, if you start with the expensive answer, it's hard to work your way back to the cheap one. She was still watching him. He couldn't tell what she was thinking, which was unusual for him. He was generally good at reading people. How much do I owe you? She said. He gave her the number. Labor, the replacement strap, an hour of diagnostic time he absorbed because he hadn't written it down and he wasn't going to start now. She didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone, opened an app, and transferred the amount before he'd even printed the receipt. I want to ask you something, she said. He waited. My company manages a portfolio of commercial properties. 17 buildings, mostly in the metro area, a few out here in the county. She put her phone in her jacket pocket. We have fleet vehicles, 12 of them. Town cars, vans, a couple of pickups. Right now we contract maintenance out to a place in the city that charges us for parts we don't need and takes 3 times as long as they should on everything straightforward. She looked around the garage again, but differently than she had that morning. Are you taking new accounts? Joel looked at her. He thought about what it would mean. Steady work, guaranteed invoices, the kind of contract that would let him stop running the numbers every month and wondering whether the season would hold. He thought about Sophie and the axolotl project and the library trip and the drawings on the office window that he'd never taken down. I'd need to look at the vehicles first, he said. I don't take accounts I can't service properly. That's fair. And I don't do work that isn't needed. If I tell you a vehicle is fine, I'm not going to find something wrong with it. That's what I'm looking for, she said. He nodded slowly. Send me the fleet inventory. I'll let you know what I can cover. She started toward the door, then stopped without turning around. How did you know to check the ground strap? She said. Joel thought about it. He thought about the shop foreman who'd taught him. A man named Briggs, who'd worked on European cars since before fuel injection existed, and who believed that the answer to any electrical problem was always physical before it was electronic. He thought about the first car he'd ever fixed on his own, a burned-out ground on a hand-me-down Honda that had stumped 3 other people before him. He thought about the 4 months of cold storage and the child's drawing in the passenger visor, and the way the car had come off the flatbed with its nose pointed down. I started where nobody else did, he said, at the beginning. She left without saying anything else. He listened to the Mercedes pull out of the lot and fade down the road, and then it was just him and the Porsche, idling in the quiet of the garage, and the drawings on the office window, and the afternoon light coming in low through the bay door. He sat there for a little while, not thinking about anything in particular, just listening to the engine run. His phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Can axolotls be pets? He smiled at his phone in the way that he only smiled at his phone when it was her. We'll talk about it tonight, he typed back. He shut the engine off. The silence after a Porsche 911 Turbo S goes quiet is its own kind of sound. He sat in it for a moment, then stood up, hung his diagnostic leads back on their hooks, and went to finish the transmission on the F-150. He had 3 more cars coming in tomorrow, and a library trip to make, and a fleet inventory to review when it arrived in his inbox, which it did, at 6:47 that evening, with a short message attached. Thank you for being thorough, it said. Not everyone is. He read it once, then set his phone face down on the kitchen counter and helped Sophie look up facts about axolotls until it was time for bed. She fell asleep with a library book open on her chest, a photograph of a pale pink axolotl with its feathery gills spread wide on the page she'd stopped at. He closed the book. He turned off her light. He stood in the doorway for a moment the way he always did, a habit he'd had since she was an infant, just making sure, just listening to her breathe in the dark. Then he went to bed, and in the morning he opened the garage at 7, the way he did every morning, and he went to work.